So, picture this. The Zilani Confederation is absolutely desperate, and I mean desperate in a way that would make you feel sick to your stomach. Their agricultural world, Thesha Prime, is literally dying from something called the Scourge. Now, this isn't just some regular disease or plague we're talking about here. This thing is a biological nightmare that eats everything organic it touches. Plants, animals, soil, bacteria, even the wooden structures the Zilani built their cities with. Everything just gets consumed. And what's left behind are these creepy crystal formations that pulse with this sickly green light. The worst part? These crystals aren't just sitting there looking pretty. They're actively spreading the infection, sending out spores that travel on the wind and infect new areas faster than Zilani can contain them. Entire continents have gone dark. Cities that house millions of beings are now nothing but empty crystal gardens that hum with an eerie energy that makes your skin crawl just thinking about it. The Zilani have been begging the galaxy for help for 3 whole cycles. That's like 3 years in our time. Folks, 3 years of sending out distress signals across 17 different sectors, pleading with anyone who would listen. They tried everything their best scientists could come up with. They threw money at the problem, resources, their brightest minds. Nothing worked. The Scourge just kept adapting, kept evolving, staying one step ahead of every countermeasure they developed. Ambassador Kira, who's basically their equivalent of a diplomat, had been losing sleep for months. You could see it in her aquamarine features. The way her usually bright coloring had dulled with stress. She'd been fielding reports from Thesha Prime that got worse by the day. The infection zones were expanding exponentially. Food production had dropped to almost nothing. Refugee ships were fleeing the planet in massive waves, carrying families who had lost everything to this unstoppable plague. Then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, someone finally answered their call for aid. But here's the thing that nobody saw coming, and I mean nobody. It wasn't the Alterian Science Council with their legendary research capabilities. It wasn't the Vorthan Empire with their advanced bioengineering technology. It wasn't even mysterious Etherians who supposedly had solutions to problems other species couldn't even understand. Nope. The response came from this completely unknown species called humans from some backwater planet that most galactic databases barely had any information about. Their home world was listed as Terra, 3 in the registry, stuck way out in what most civilized species consider the galactic equivalent of the middle of nowhere. Most beings assumed that sector was probably uninhabited or maybe home to some primitive species that hadn't even figured out faster-than-light travel yet. But the message these humans sent back was so casual, it almost seemed like a joke. No formal diplomatic protocols, no lengthy negotiations about payment or terms. Just a simple response. We specialize in impossible problems. Get us landing coordinates for 12 specialists. That's it. 12 specialists to solve a crisis that had stumped the combined scientific minds of 14 different advanced civilizations. Ambassador Kira was thinking they were finally getting some kind of advanced research team, right? Maybe some fancy bioengineers with cutting-edge technology that made their own science look primitive. She imagined teams of specialists in pristine laboratory gear, carrying equipment that would make the Confederation's best tools look like stone knives. Maybe they'd need massive research facilities, weeks of preparation, careful studies, and analysis. Instead, what drops out of that human transport ship when it finally arrives are 12 people wearing what can only be described as basic environmental suits. Not the sleek, high-tech gear you'd expect from galactic saviors, but simple, functional equipment that looked like it might have come from a hardware store. They're carrying gear that honestly looks like it came from a garage sale. Handheld scanners, basic sample containers, tools that any first-year science student might recognize. But the really weird part? These humans are acting like they're on vacation instead of facing a galaxy-ending plague. They're chatting casually among themselves, making jokes, completely relaxed. One of them actually stops to admire the view of Thesha Prime's crystal-infected landscape, like he's sightseeing. Another one is taking pictures with some kind of personal recording device, grinning like a tourist. The Confederation military personnel who were assigned to escort them are getting more nervous by the minute, watching these humans just casually stroll around like they own the place. These are battle-hardened soldiers who've seen combat across multiple star systems, and are fidgeting like nervous recruits watching these humans treat the most serious crisis in Confederation history, like it's some kind of interesting field trip. Nobody knew it yet, but everything was about a change in ways that would reshape how the galaxy thought about impossible problems forever. This is where things get absolutely wild, and I'm talking about the kind of wild that makes you question everything you thought you knew about how the universe works. So Captain David Miller, who's leading this human team, does something that literally makes every Zilani observer's blood run cold. He just reaches up, clicks a few buttons on his helmet, and takes the thing right off. Just like that. No hesitation, no protective protocols, no testing the air first. And then he takes a deep breath of contaminated atmosphere, like he's enjoying fresh mountain air on a camping trip. The Zilani scientists are practically having heart attacks watching this. The radiation levels in the infected zones are so high that their instruments can barely measure them accurately. We're talking about radiation that should be cooking organic tissue from the inside out within minutes. Their own people need full environmental suits with triple shielding just to get within a mile of these areas safely. But this human captain is just standing there, breathing it in and actually smiling. Not the forced smile of someone trying to be brave, but the genuine smile of someone who's genuinely comfortable. He's looking around at the crystal formations with what can only be described as professional interest, like a contractor examining a construction site. His team starts spreading out into the infected zones, and this is where things get really insane. These are areas where Confederation's most advanced automated probes got completely destroyed within minutes. Not damaged, not malfunctioning, completely obliterated. The Scourge doesn't just consume organic matter. It actively attacks anything that enters its territory. Their probes were built with military-grade shielding and still got torn apart by the aggressive crystal growths. Yet here are these 12 humans just walking in like they're taking a stroll through a park. They're not running. They're not being cautious. They're just casually wandering around picking up samples with their bare hands. No protective gloves, no specialized collection tools. Just reaching down and grabbing chunks of the most dangerous biological agent the galaxy has ever seen. Dr. Rebecca Stone, who turns out to be their xenobiologist, does something that nearly gives Ambassador Kira a panic attack. She actually starts laughing when she sees how the Scourge reacts to their presence. Not nervous laughter, not hysteria, but genuine amusement. She's watching these crystal formations pulse and writhe as they try to attack the human team, and she's finding it funny. She turns to the terrified Zilani observers who are watching for what they consider a safe distance and says, "Oh, wow! This reminds me of that fungal outbreak we dealt with back in the Amazon basin a few years ago. Nasty stuff, really aggressive, but totally manageable once you understand the reproduction cycle." She's talking about the most destructive force in known galactic history, like it's something she dealt with on a weekend hiking trip. The Zilani scientists are trying to process what they're hearing. This human woman is comparing their existential crisis to something that happened on their home planet that they apparently handled so casually she barely remembers the details. The Amazon, wherever that is, apparently has things that behave similarly to a plague that has stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. Within hours, and I cannot stress this enough, hours, not the months or years that Confederation scientists expected, these humans have completely mapped the Scourge's behavior patterns. They've identified its reproductive mechanisms, figure out how it spreads, and determine its weak points, all while treating the whole thing like a field exercise from school. But here's the kicker that really sends everyone into a state of shock. The human solution isn't some advanced technology or clever scientific breakthrough. They're planning to fight biological warfare with biological warfare. Dr. Stone starts unpacking containers that she's brought from Earth, and inside are samples of organisms from their home planet. She explains to the horrified Zilani that they're going to introduce Earth bacteria and microorganisms directly into the infected zones. Basically, they're unleashing their own microscopic army to battle the Scourge on its own terms. The Confederation scientists are absolutely terrified by this approach. They've spent generations developing protocols to prevent exactly this kind of biological contamination between worlds. But the humans are acting like this is standard procedure. Captain Miller is coordinating the deployment like he's organizing a community cleanup project. His team members are walking directly into the most dangerous areas on the planet, carrying containers full of Earth organisms, and they're all chatting casually about implementation strategies. The Zilani are watching in absolute horror as these humans deliberately expose themselves to both the galaxy-threatening plague and their own potentially equally dangerous countermeasures. They're treating the whole situation like it's just another Tuesday at the office. No protective gear, no safety protocols, no emergency contingencies. And the most terrifying part? They seem completely confident that everything will work out just fine. What happens next completely shatters every safety protocol the Confederation has developed over thousands of years of space exploration and scientific advancement. And I'm talking about protocols that were written in the blood of countless disasters, procedures that were developed after species accidentally wiped themselves out trying to solve biological problems, just like this one. These Earth organisms that the humans casually release don't just fight the scourge. They absolutely demolish it in a way that's both horrifying and mesmerizing to watch. The crystalline structures that have been growing for years, some of them towering hundreds of feet into the sky, start dissolving like sugar cubes dropped into hot water. But it's not a slow process. We're talking about massive crystal formations that were supposedly indestructible just melting away within hours. The Earth bacteria are literally tearing the scourge apart at the molecular level, breaking down the complex crystal matrices that had stumped the galaxy's best scientists. You can actually watch it happening in real time. The sickly green glow that had been pulsing through the crystals starts flickering and fading as the Earth microorganisms work their way through the structure like tiny demolition crews. What's even more incredible is watching the humans during all this chaos. They're just walking through what can only be described as a biological battlefield, like they're strolling through their backyard garden. Captain Miller is checking readings on a handheld device that looks like something you might buy at an electronics store, completely relaxed while around him an alien plague is being systematically destroyed by organisms from his home planet. Dr. Stone is actually taking notes in what appears to be a regular notebook, occasionally stopping to collect samples of the dissolving crystals like she's documenting a science project. Other team members are scattered across the infected zone, monitoring different areas with equipment that still looks surprisingly basic compared to what the Confederation uses for far less dangerous work. Ambassador Kira, who's been trying to maintain some level of diplomatic composure throughout this whole ordeal, finally reaches her breaking point. She approaches Captain Miller with barely contained panic and starts explaining how dangerous this all seems. She's listing off the potential risks, the possibility of creating something even worse than the original scourge, the chance that these Earth organisms might not stop with just the crystal formations. Captain Miller listens politely to her concerns, nodding along like he's heard this kind of worry before. Then he just shrugs in the most casual way possible and says, "Oh, this stuff? This is actually pretty mild by our standards. Back home, we deal with things that make this look like a minor inconvenience." That's the moment when it finally hits the Confederation leadership, like a punch to the gut. These aren't humanity's most dangerous biological weapons that they're watching dissolve an unstoppable plague. These aren't even their experimental or cutting-edge solutions. These are the tame ones, the safe options, the organisms that humans consider harmless enough to carry around in basic containers and release without extensive safety protocols. Dr. Stone overhears a conversation and adds, almost as an afterthought, "Yeah, we had to be really careful about what we brought. Most of our usual cleanup crews would probably consume half the planet before we could control them. These little guys are much more selective." The implications of that statement send chills through everyone listening. If these Earth organisms that are casually destroying a galaxy-threatening plague are considered the gentle option, what exactly exists on humanity's home planet that they were afraid to bring? Reports start flooding in from other infected worlds where the Confederation had requested the human solution be implemented. And a terrifying pattern emerges that changes how everyone thinks about this crisis. The humans aren't struggling with this problem. They're not working around the clock. They're not calling for additional resources or backup teams. They're breezing through it like it's routine maintenance. On Kalara Station, a team of 6 humans cleared 3 infected levels in a single day. On the mining world of Vex Prime, 4 humans eliminated scourge colonies that had been growing for 2 years, and they finished early enough to help the local population with some unrelated infrastructure repairs. The agricultural moon of Thesson was completely cleared by two humans who apparently spent most of their time teaching local farmers better soil management techniques. Each report that comes and makes it clearer that humanity isn't treating this as the crisis of the century. For them, this is apparently just Tuesday. They're solving the greatest threat the Confederation has ever faced with the same energy and concern that you might put into fixing a leaky faucet. And that realization is somehow more terrifying than the original plague ever was. The Confederation scientists finally get access to Earth's preliminary survey data, and when they start reading through it, you can literally watch the color drain from their faces. At first, they think there must be some kind of translation error, or maybe the humans made mistakes in their measurements, because what they're seeing can't possibly be right. Terra 3 isn't just hostile to life. It's basically a death trap that somehow impossibly supports a thriving biosphere. Let's start with the atmosphere, which should be the first clue that something is seriously wrong with this planet. The oxygen levels would literally poison most galactic species within hours. We're talking about atmospheric composition that's so reactive it would cause respiratory failure in anything adapted to normal galactic conditions. Most civilized species need oxygen concentrations around 8 to 12% to survive comfortably. Earth's atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which is like breathing pure fire for most beings. But it gets worse. So much worse. The radiation levels from their unstable star should have sterilized the entire planet millions of years ago. The Confederation's own scientists run the numbers 3 times because they can't believe what they're seeing. Earth's sun pumps out radiation that would cook most organic life forms. Yet somehow this planet is teeming with billions of species that have not only survived but thrived under these conditions. The geological surveys are even more disturbing. Earth's surface is constantly shifting and moving due to something called tectonic activity. Massive chunks of the planet's crust regularly smash into each other, creating earthquakes that would level cities and volcanic eruptions that spew toxic gases into the atmosphere. The weather patterns include storms with wind speeds that could tear apart most galactic architecture, and temperature fluctuations that swing from freezing to boiling across different regions. But here's where it gets really insane. Every single organism they've cataloged from Earth is adapted for what can only be described as constant biological warfare. Plants that produce toxins deadly enough to kill large animals, insects that inject paralyzing venoms, bacteria that can survive in conditions that would destroy most known life forms. The entire biosphere is basically one massive arms race where everything is trying to kill everything else, and somehow this created a stable ecosystem. The human physiological data starts making terrifying sense when viewed through this lens. These people have bone density that's 3 times galactic standard because they evolved on a planet where gravity constantly tries to crush them. Their immune systems can neutralize toxins that would literally melt the internal organs of other species because they had survived in an environment where deadly poisons are everywhere. Their psychological profiles show something that initially confused Confederation analysts but now seems obviously adaptive. These humans think taking what any sane being would consider insane risks is perfectly normal behavior. They've evolved on a world where cautious, careful thinking gets you killed. So they develop mental frameworks that allow them to make split-second decisions in life-threatening situations and actually enjoy the challenge. Dr. Stone's casual comment about the Amazon basin starts making horrible sense when they realize that Earth apparently has multiple regions that are more biologically dangerous than anything Confederation has encountered in centuries of space exploration. The Amazon isn't some special containment zone or research facility. It's just one of many ecosystems on Earth where organisms routinely deal with biological threats that would overwhelm galactic science. The Zilani leadership starts having this creeping, horrible realization as they piece together what this all means. Humanity's response to the scourge wasn't some incredible scientific breakthrough that took generations to develop. This wasn't their greatest minds working together to solve an impossible problem. For humans, dealing with the scourge was literally just Tuesday. They evolved on a world where biological horrors like the scourge are probably considered part of the local wildlife. The organisms they brought to fight the plague weren't exotic superweapons carefully developed in advanced laboratories. They were probably just things they scraped off rocks in their backyard and thought might be useful for the job. Captain Miller's casual confidence throughout the whole crisis wasn't bravado or professional training. He genuinely wasn't worried because, from his perspective, the scourge was barely more threatening than a common cold. Dr. Stone's amusement at the crystal formations wasn't disrespect for Crisis. It was genuine entertainment at seeing something that reminded her of a minor problem they'd dealt with back home. As the last infected zones on Thesha Prime get completely cleared and reports coming confirming that every scourge outbreak across 14 worlds has been eliminated, Ambassador Kira finds herself facing a problem she never expected to have. The galaxy's greatest crisis has been solved, her people are safe, and civilization has been saved from extinction. But now she's lying awake at night, wondering what you're supposed to do when your saviors are somehow more terrifying than the thing that was trying to kill you in the first place. Captain Miller is standing in the Confederation Council chambers, and you can practically feel the tension in the air. This is the most important gathering in recent galactic history, with representatives from 14 different species all packed into one room to hear the final report on humanity's solution to the Scourge crisis. But here's what's really wild about this scene. Every single one of these representatives is keeping their distance from the human captain, even though there are multiple safety barriers and atmospheric controls in place. These aren't cowards we're talking about. These are seasoned diplomats and military leaders who've dealt with everything the galaxy can throw at them. Yet they're all unconsciously backing away from this one human who's standing there in a simple uniform, looking completely relaxed and friendly. It's like some primitive instinct is telling them that this pleasant-looking person from Terra 3 is actually the most dangerous thing in the room. Miller starts his presentation with the kind of casual confidence that makes everyone even more nervous. He's not using fancy diplomatic language or complex technical jargon. He's just explaining what happened in the same tone you might use to describe fixing a broken appliance. The scourge, he reports, is completely gone from all infected worlds. Not contained, not managed, not reduced to acceptable levels. Gone. Eliminated. Problem solved. The timeline he presents is what really gets the people. 2 cycles. 2 cycles to completely eliminate a threat that had stumped the combined scientific resources of the Confederation for years. He's showing before and after images of infected worlds, and the transformation is so complete it looks like they're pictures of entirely different planets. Where there used to be crystalline wastelands, there are now healthy ecosystems already beginning to recover. But the methods section of his report is what makes several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. The humans essentially fought biological warfare with biological warfare, using organisms from their home planet that, if deployed against sentient beings, would be considered war crimes under every galactic treaty ever written. Miller presents this information like he's discussing routine pest control, completely oblivious to the horror he's inspiring in his audience. Ambassador Kira is watching the faces around the room and seeing the same realization dawn on everyone simultaneously. Humanity didn't just solve their crisis through superior technology or brilliant scientific innovation. They solved it by casually unleashing biological agents that are more terrifying than the original problem, and they did it with the same level of concern most species would show for watering plants. But here's the real kicker that sends the entire room into shocked silence. As Miller wraps up his presentation, he almost casually mentions something that changes everything. Earth survey teams, he says with the same tone you might use to mention weekend plans, have identified 17 other potential threats in the local galactic cluster. Not current problems that need immediate attention, but future problems that might need addressing someday if they develop into actual issues. 17 other threats. In the local cluster alone. That means humanity's scientists have been scanning their region of space and identifying potential existential crises, like items on a grocery list. The Scourge, which nearly destroyed galactic civilization, was apparently just one entry on a much longer catalog of things that might eventually need human attention. The room goes absolutely dead silent. You could hear a pin drop in the vacuum of space. These representatives are processing the implications of what they've just heard, and none of them like where their thoughts are leading. These humans haven't just solved the crisis of the century. They've essentially auditioned to become the galaxy's cleanup crew, the species you call when everything else has failed, and you need someone who thinks impossible problems are just interesting puzzles to solve on a lazy afternoon. The power dynamic in this region of space has fundamentally shifted, and everyone in the room knows it. The Confederation asked for help with their greatest crisis and accidentally discovered that somewhere out in the galactic backwater, there's a species that considers their worst nightmares to be routine maintenance issues. Ambassador Kira realizes that they've opened a door that can never be closed. Humanity now knows that the galaxy is full of civilizations that can't handle the kind of problems that humans apparently deal with as a matter of course. And worse, the humans seem genuinely happy to help, which somehow makes the whole situation even more unsettling. As the formal presentations wrap up and the humans prepare to return to Earth, Captain Miller delivers their parting message with perfect casualness. Give us a call if anything else comes up. We're always happy to help with this kind of thing. And now the galaxy knows something that will change how they sleep at night. Somewhere out there in the outer systems, there's an entire world full of Deathworlders just waiting for the next crisis that would send every other species running for the hills. They'll probably pack snacks for the trip and treat it like a fun weekend project. The age of calling humans for help has officially begun,